Imagine you are cruising at 17,000 feet. The seatbelt sign is off. The flight attendants are serving tea. Suddenly, there is a deafening, explosive bang. You look toward the front of the plane, and the cockpit door has blown open. But that's not the worst part. The captain isn't in his seat anymore. He is hanging out of the window, sucked halfway out of the aircraft, pinned against the fuselage by 400-mile-per-hour winds. In aviation, safety is the norm. But when things go wrong, they don't just go wrong, they turn into absolute nightmares in the blink of an eye. Welcome back to Plane Morph. We often hear that flying is the safest way to travel, and statistically, it is. But for the passengers and crew on the flights we're discussing today, statistics didn't matter. We are counting down the top 7 plane moments that turned into absolute terror in seconds. From roofs ripping off in midair to engines turning into balls of fire, these are the moments where seconds felt like hours, and survival seemed impossible. You're afraid of flying, you might want to grab a pillow to hide behind. Let's get into it. 7. The convertible jet. Aloha Airlines Flight 243, April 28, 1988. Aloha Airlines Flight 243 takes off from Hilo, Hawaii, for a short hop to Honolulu. It's a routine flight with 95 people on board. The plane reaches its cruising altitude of 24,000 feet. The sky is blue, the ocean is calm. Then, at exactly 1:48 p.m., a small section of the fuselage ruptures due to metal fatigue. In a fraction of a second, the explosive decompression rips an enormous 18-foot section of the roof clean off the airplane. Instantly, the passengers in the first-class section are sitting in the open air, exposed to 300-mile-per-hour winds and temperatures of -45 degrees. The noise is so deafening, the pilots can't hear each other speak. The floor beams are the only thing holding the nose of the plane to the rest of the body. One flight attendant, Clarabelle Lansing, was tragically swept out of the plane in that first second. For the next 13 minutes, the pilots had to land a plane that was literally disintegrating around them. The terror of looking up and seeing nothing but sky is something those survivors will never forget. 6. The miracle on the Hudson. U.S. Airways Flight 1549. Sometimes, the terror comes from silence. On January 15, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport. Just 2 minutes into the flight, the Airbus A320 struck a flock of Canada geese. Passengers reported hearing a loud thud, followed by a sickening vibration. Then, the most terrifying sound in aviation occurred: the sound of engines winding down. Both engines had failed simultaneously. The aircraft, weighing 150,000 pounds, was now a glider over one of the most densely populated cities on Earth. Captain Chesley "Sully" Sullenberger had mere seconds to decide: return to the airport, which was likely impossible, or attempt something that had rarely succeeded at water landing. The terror here wasn't chaos. 'Twas the eerie quiet as the plane descended toward the freezing Hudson River. The command brace for impact is something no passenger ever wants to hear. 5. The dive of death. China Airlines Flight 006. Cruising at 41,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean is usually the smoothest part of a flight. But for China Airlines Flight 006 in 1985, it became a roller coaster from hell. The Boeing 747 encountered turbulence, and the No. 4 engine hung fire and failed. The autopilot tried to correct the imbalance, but it was overwhelmed. The pilots disconnected the autopilot, and the massive jumbo jet immediately rolled over and entered a vertical dive. The G-forces were so intense that the pilots were pinned to their seats, unable to lift their arms to reach the controls. Passengers were crushed into their seats as the plane plummeted. 30,000 feet in just 2.5 minutes. That is faster than a skydiver. As they broke through the clouds, the pilots saw the ocean rushing toward them. At the very last second, they managed to level the wings and pull up, subjecting the plane to 5 Gs. The wings were permanently bent upwards, but they survived. 4. The impossible landing. United Airlines Flight 232. This story is often taught in flight schools as the ultimate example of crew resource management, but for the passengers, it was 44 minutes of pure dread. In July 1989, a DC-10 flying over Iowa suffered a catastrophic failure of its tail-mounted engine. The explosion didn't just kill the engine. Shrapnel severed all 3 hydraulic lines. Hydraulics are the muscles of a plane. Without them, the pilots couldn't steer, use the flaps, or use the brakes. The plane was uncontrollable, constantly wanting to turn right and flip over. The pilots had to steer the plane by varying the thrust of the 2 remaining engines, 1 throttle forward to turn left, 1 back to turn right. The terror climaxed at the runway in Sioux City. Unable to slow down, they hit the ground at 240 knots. The plane cartwheeled and burst into flames. While 111 people tragically lost their lives, 185 people miraculously survived a crash that should have been 100% fatal. 3. The ghost in the machine. Qantas Flight 72. We trust technology to keep us safe. But on Qantas Flight 72 in 2008, the computer became the enemy. Flying from Singapore to Perth, the Airbus A330 was cruising smoothly. Suddenly, one of the plane's inertial reference units began sending spiked database information to the flight computer. The computer, thinking the plane was climbing dangerously high, decided to save the aircraft. Without warning, the plane pitched nose down violently. Anyone not wearing a seatbelt, including crew members, was instantly launched into the ceiling. Passengers described seeing people floating in zero gravity before being slammed back down. The pilots were fighting a computer that was determined to crash them into the Indian Ocean. It happened twice before they could make an emergency landing. It remains one of the most terrifying examples of automation going rogue. 2. Speedbird 9. British Airways Flight 9. It was a night flight over Indonesia in 1982. The passengers noticed a strange blue electric glow on the engines and windshield, a phenomenon known as St. Elmo's fire. It looked beautiful, but it was a sign of impending doom. The plane had flown into a cloud of volcanic ash from Mount Galunggung. Ash isn't like smoke, it's pulverized rock. It melted inside the engines, clogging them instantly. One by one, all 4 engines failed. The 747 became a silent, 400-ton glider in the pitch black of night, the cabin filled with a sulfurous smell. The captain, Eric Moody, made one of the most understated announcements in history. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a small problem. All 4 engines have stopped. We are doing our damnedest to get them going again. I trust you are not in too much distress." They fell from 37,000 feet to 12,000 feet before the cold air solidified the ash enough to break it loose, and the engines roared back to life just moments before they would have hit the mountains. 1. The pilot who went outside. British Airways Flight 5390. We return to our #1 spot, the story we teased at the start. British Airways Flight 5390. 13 minutes after takeoff, a windscreen panel installed with the wrong size bolts blew out. Captain Tim Lancaster was sucked out instantly. His legs caught on the flight controls, disengaging the autopilot and sending the plane into a dive. Flight attendant Nigel Ogden rushed into the cockpit and grabbed the captain's belt. For 20 minutes, while the co-pilots struggled to land the plane, the crew held on to Lancaster's legs. The captain was battered by freezing winds and flailing against the side of the jet. The crew assumed he was dead, but they held on because if they let go, his body would fly into the engine and kill them all. Miraculously, the co-pilot landed safely. Even more miraculously, Captain Tim Lancaster survived with only frostbite and fractures. It stands as perhaps the most visually terrifying moment in commercial aviation history. These moments remind us of the incredible training of flight crews and the resilience of the human spirit. In the face of absolute terror, these pilots and passengers fought for every second. Which of these stories did you find the most terrifying? Or do you know of a near miss we didn't include? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into aviation history, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel, and subscribe for more true stories of survival. Thanks for watching, and fly safe.